Alright, in this tutorial what we're going to do is we are going to lay out the UVs for this Lego minifig. Now real fast, just to address what the UVs are, is the UVs are basically the three-dimensional geometry that's been laid out into a two-dimensional space. Alright, and it's called UVs because the X, the Y, and the Z axes are already taken. They're already occupied in the three-dimensional space, and so the U and the V are kind of representative of the two-dimensional axes, the X and the Y. A really nice analog of this is actually the kind of the concept of the paper cube right here. All right, because when it's all folded up, we have an object, we have a form that exists in three-dimensional space. It's possessive of height, width, and depth. But if you were to unfold this and fold it out, essentially we end up with a pattern like this, where we have some edges that are combined, some edges that are shared, and we have some edges that end up being split. But we lay this down nice in a two-dimensional space so that we can take it into an image editing program like Photoshop, and we can actually go ahead and paint it with the intention of taking it back into Maya and rewrapping it around the model right here. Okay, now to help us get started, what I've done is I have created a special texture. All right, it's this colored checkerboard texture. And one of the reasons for this is we're going to start by creating a material, applying this to the color channel, and then throwing that on the model. And what you're probably going to notice is it's going to stretch weird in some areas, it's going to present itself awkwardly in others, and that's actually what we want. We want to use this pattern, the predictability of the shape of the square checkers, and also the predictability of the proportions of the numbers to help us try and iron out any stretching in the textures that might be occurring. All right. So let's go back over into Maya, and the first thing I'm going to do is pull up my Hypershade window. And in Hypershade, I'll go ahead and start by creating a new blend material. And if I double click on that blend material, it'll open it up here in the attribute editor. I'm going to click on this checker box next to the color channel. I'm going to go ahead and select File as my input type. I'm going to click on the folder next to the name field and select the colored_checkerboard.jpg and hit open. Okay, now that that's been done, I'll select my torso. I will right click on the material and select Assign Material to Selection. Now it doesn't look like anything happened because I need to press 6 on my keyboard to toggle my textures on. Now, in this particular case, you can see it's getting especially weird right here towards the center. This is because at one point I had mirrored this along the x-axis. Now, also, if you look at the side, you know, we're not seeing the checkerboard pattern. That's because I actually started modeling this with a plane, and then it had extruded this back. So essentially, you know, it's just stretching the textures between those two planes right there. Now, another thing that I'm going to do to help me more efficiently model this out is I am going to select the arms, I'm going to select the pelvis, and select the legs. I'm going to create a new layer. And let's see, so that ended up on layer 1. I'll double click on layer 1 and name this arms _ legs _ etc. Go ahead and hit save just so I can toggle that visibility off. I'll take the head. I'm going to throw the head on its own layer, so I'll double click on that, call it head, hit save, and select the torso, and let's put the torso on its own layer. And we're doing this so we can just toggle the visibility of things off and on, so we can isolate the piece of geometry or the object that we will be working on for the UV mapping. All right. Now, one of the reasons why I started by addressing the concepts that drive the UV mapping by talking about a paper cube is because essentially the torso is a modified cube. All right, it's very boxy. It has, you know, it has six edges, and it also has this post that comes out of the top. So we're going to focus on the boxy part of the body, and we'll come and we'll address the post in just a little bit. But what I want to do is I want to select all the faces that are associated with the box and deselect the faces that are associated with that cylindrical post coming out of the top. Okay. With those selected, I'm going to click on UV and open up the UV texture editor. And I'm just going to scale this window. All right, so that I can have it open simultaneously as I'm working in the Maya viewport. Now it's a little hard to see exactly what's going on. We can see the color checkerboard pattern in this upper right-hand quadrant because it has been applied to the object that's currently selected. If I click on this icon right here, that's my texture dimmer. And that way I can just lower the value on that texture so it's a little easier to see the UVs as they're laid on top of it. Now currently what I have selected is this right here. I'll just move it off to the side. And it's kind of hard to really make sense of how this equates that right there. And that's actually part of the reason why the textures are stretching and doing some awkward things as badly as they are. But with that selected, actually, you know what? I am going to middle mouse click, go to shell. I'm going to grab these pieces that represent the cylinder. And I'm going to move them up and out of the way. All right. I'm going to come back and select these pieces right in here. I'm still in select shell mode, and that'll reselect the faces that I want to do the UV mapping on. Now, the easiest way to handle the UV mapping on something that is based off of a cube is to click on UVs and come down to automatic. All right. And what automatic mapping is going to do is it's going to analyze the geometry from both the positive and the negative values along all three axes. All right. So, essentially it's going to take this cuboid shape and it's going to break it up into 4 different points of view. So we have the top view, we have the bottom view, we have looks like it's our right, our left, the front, and the back. All right, and you can see that the way that it is distributed the texture onto this model is muy bueno. It's looking really nice. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with the front here. So I'm going to make sure that I'm in select shell mode, and I'm going to select that, and I'm just going to drag it here off to the side. All right. And now I'm going to click on the rotate counterclockwise icon twice so that it orients it in a way that I find effective. I'm going to go back to the select shell mode. I'm going to grab the top and I'm going to rotate that twice counterclockwise so there's the same kind of directionality to the pattern. And I'm going to drag it over here and I'm going to zoom in there a little bit, and I am going to visually place it next to the front piece. Now you want to make sure that you place the appropriate edges next to each other. So these 2 edges are a shared edge, all right? And I know that because I can see the texture going up the front and right across the top of this torso, and it appears to be doing so in an uninterrupted fashion, all right? So now that I've done that, I'm going to right-click, grab my UVs, I'm going to grab the UVs along this shared edge, click on polygons, and come down to merge. Okay, and if I toggle in and out of smooth preview mode, you can see that affects the way that the UVs are represented here in the UV texture editor. But that just shows us that those UVs have indeed merged along that shared edge. Now, let's go ahead and grab the shell for the back right here. Now, I'm specifically going to do this incorrect because I'm going to draw the assumption that some of you guys are going to run into this problem. So I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees clockwise and bring it down here like this. And you can see that, it's pretty obvious that these are not shared edges right here. All right, but I'm going to go ahead and place it right in here like that. I'm going to come into UVs, and I'm going to select these UVs right here, and I'm going to try and tell it to merge. All right. So I've told it to merge, but if I come in here and I grab the shell and I move it, you can see that it has not merged at all. The reason for that is because this UV right here does not correspond to this UV right there. All right, you can actually see, if you look in the Maya viewport, that we have two UVs that are selected on opposite sides. If the UVs don't correspond, they will not merge. And I know some of you guys are going to run into that problem. It's going to be a little frustrating. So please take note that they have to be corresponding. So I'm going to go back into the shell right here. I'm going to rotate this 180 degrees. And then I'm going to bring it up here like this and reposition it. All right, so right click, select UVs. All right, if I drag over these two UVs, you can see that it appears that only one thing is selected here in the viewport, and that's awesome. That's exactly what I want. So now I'll go ahead and grab all of those polygons, merge UVs, all right, and now this texture runs uninterruptedly up the front, across the shoulders, and down the back. So let's go ahead and grab the UVs for the bottom. All right, so shell. I'm going to bring this right around over in here like so. And rotate it like that. All right, I want to position my camera in the viewport just to make sure that I'm positioning this where it needs to go. All right, right click, grab the shell. I'm going to drag a selection over that. Now you can see I was a little generous with my selection. I grabbed part of an edge that's not part of this UV set, but that's okay because it will only merge the shared and common UVs. All right, now I want you to take note in the viewport that we do have a noticeable invisible seam right here along the bottom. All right, there's not a lot we can really do to help that out, and where you have those edges that are not physically merged together, you'll always end up with just a little bit of distortion, which you can see down here in this bottom corner. And so we're going to strategically place those in areas where they're not going to manifest themselves as directly. All right. Hence the reason why we're focusing on putting them on the back side and right down here, on the rear side of the waist. All right. Now I'm going to zoom out here and let's go ahead and grab the sides. So grab this shell. Actually, I'll grab this one first because that's the one on our right. So I'm going to bring it over here like so and position it alongside its corresponding UVs. Now, there is this angle right here that doesn't necessarily match the geometry in this side shell. So we can just right click on it, we can select the UVs, and I can actually come in here and move the UVs individually to make those line up, to make those match. All right, so grab these couple right here at the top. Do the same thing right there. Okay, in my viewport, it looks like the texture runs uninterruptedly right along the that corner right there. So let's go ahead and select these UVs, polygons, merge. And I'm going to come down here, select those. I'll just press G on my keyboard because merge was the last thing that I had done. It'll repeat that function or repeat that action. All right, let's go ahead and grab this last piece and we'll bring it over here like so. And go through the same process. I'm going to rotate over here just to make sure that visually I'm lining my UVs up correctly. All right, and there we go. We have our UVs laid out for the torso, but we haven't done anything yet about this neck. So I'm actually going to do something kind of a little weird with the neck. I'm actually going to map it in two different ways, and then we'll use the techniques that we address on mapping the neck to actually map the head. I'm going to start by doing a paint selection for the faces on these upper faces right here. All right, if it's a little hard to see what you're doing, you can always press 5 on your keyboard to turn the textures off. Sometimes it's easier to see the selection, when you're looking at it in just the regular shaded view. But if I come up here and look, you see that I essentially just have triangles that have been selected right here. Actually, I may have inadvertently grabbed more than I had intended. All right, let's try this again. So paint select, all right, grab those. And so I just have these triangles that are selected right here. If I turn the texture back on by pressing 6 on my keyboard, you can see that essentially what we have is what is that, 8? We have 8 of these individual triangularly shaped faces, but they're all occupying exactly the same space, which is creating this patterning that we're seeing right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a planar projection on this. So I'm going to click on UV, and instead of coming down to automatic, I'm going to come down to planar and select the options box. Now in the options box, we can tell it exactly what axis we want to do the projection down. And I want to do it down the y-axis because we're looking down on the top of this. If I hit project, you can see that we have a nice little representation of the top of the cylinder right here. All right, and the nice thing is that it's doing it without any noticeable visual distortion on the texture itself. So I can come in here to those UVs, and I can scale those down. All right, actually I'm going to bring it right over in here in this area. We'll just scale it down and then pretty much plug this little hole All right, every once in a while this translate tool just doesn't work the way that you expect that it would. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put it in there. All right, and now what we want to do is we want to grab these remaining faces right here, and this time I'm going to do a cylindrical projection. All right, which is the best type of projection for a piece of geometry that is cylindrical in nature. Now you can see that the texture appears to be stretching just a little bit, so I'm going to come over here into the UV texture editor, and I'm actually going to scale this down just a little bit, just to the point where we're not really seeing any noticeable distortion on that texture. All right, so now I'll scale it all down until its texture, or the distribution of the checkerboard pattern on it, approximates the distribution of the checkerboard pattern on the body. All right, and actually I'm just noticing right now that I don't think I ever merged these UVs up here. So let's just go ahead and do that. There we go. All right, and let's go ahead and take this and just for the moment move it off to the side as well. Okay, so there we go. The UVs are all laid out on the torso there. So now let's go ahead and move over and take care of the UVs on the head. So I'll turn this layer off and turn the head on. I'll minimize that, come back to Hypershade, and I'm just going to middle mouse click and drag and drop the blend material onto the head right there. And there we go. So it's not horrible. I can kind of make sense of it, but there still is some pretty bad stretching going on. So let's bring that UV texture editor back. All right, select the head here in object mode, and let's go ahead and start by clicking on UVs and coming down to a cylindrical projection on that. All right. So for the most part, it's doing relatively nice in through here and through the center. Actually, to tell you the truth, I think I could scale that down just a little bit more, just to try and help minimize the stretching or the squashing that's happening on the texture right here through the center. But we're going to need to address some of those areas. But more specifically, we're going to need to address the top right here. So I'm going to grab the paint selection. I'm going to select the top, press 5 on my keyboard to toggle out of the smooth preview, just to make sure I have the faces selected that I need. And let's go ahead and do a planar projection. Now, the last time we did a planar projection, it was along the y-axis, and so it'll go ahead and do another projection along whichever was the last axis selected. So let's go ahead and do this piece right here, in addition to grabbing the paint select tool, grabbing all those faces right there for the top of the inner post receiving hole. So we'll turn the textures back on, do another planar projection. All right, let's go ahead and move those over there like so. And we'll just kind of leave those up and out of the way for the moment. I'm going to right click over here. I'm going to go to the select shell mode. What I actually want to do is try and grab the shell that's associated with these faces right here on the inside. And I'm just going to move those down. Now you can see that there is some pretty severe stretching on those. Let's go ahead and scale that up about like so. And then also you can see that the texture is backwards. That's actually a pretty easy fix by clicking on polygons and coming down to flip. All right, now you can flip it horizontally or you can flip it vertically, and you can specify that in the flip options box. But the default is set to horizontal, and that worked perfect for that piece of geometry right there. All right, so let's just push that one down and out of the way and come up in here and focus now on the head. Okay, so you saw how previously we were able to affect the distribution of the texture here in the center by scaling the overall UVs up or down. Now, we can't necessarily do this uniformly all the time, but what we can do is we can come in here and grab the individual sets of UVs. So right click. Okay, so I'm going to select those UVs right there along the top, and I can actually start to move those up and down, right, to give it the appropriate spacing. All right, so I'm going to grab those two along the top, start to move those down, or move those up to where it helps alleviate the stretching that was occurring on that section of that top post. Actually, I'm going to go into select shell. I'm going to grab these two, and I'm going to move them out of the way over here, because I'm pretty sure these UVs will start to encroach into the territory they are previously occupying. All right, but now let's come in here like so, and we actually have something kind of tricky going on right here. Actually, I think the distribution of these UVs right here and the distribution of these UVs in relationship to each other are working well. But we actually have two edges that are occupying the same space. All right, this edge and that edge, at least from the point of view of the UVs. If we were to hop over into the side ortho view, you would actually see how that would be happening. But I am going to come into select edge mode, and I'm going to double click on that edge and then hold down shift and double click on this edge right here. And in the UV texture editor, I'll click on select and come down to convert selection to UVs. All right. I'll back out a little bit and hold down shift and select these UVs right here at the top. Reposition my camera in the viewport. And now I'll actually start to put a little distance between the allocation of those two UV edges. All right, so there we go. That looks better. Now we'll grab those and move those down like so. Okay, and I'm going to continue to do just a little futzing, a little finagling. All right, now we can't help all instances of deformation, because as this cylinder gets smaller up at the top than it is right in here, you just have to recognize that, there's not a lot we could really do about that. But let's go ahead and come down and manage the UVs on the bottom. All right, and I think I'm happy with that. So let's go to select shell mode. All right, back this out. I'm going to go ahead and select the shells for all these pieces of geometry, and let's go ahead and scale them down. All right, move. All right, let's see, going to rotate. Okay, sorry, the tool's being kind of dumb again. All right, here we go. Let's turn the torso on and grab both of these two in object mode. All right, so that we see both of them simultaneously here. All right, want to make sure that we have all the geometry for the torso selected. So I'm going to scale it all down so that it fits in this quadrant right here like that. Okay, now let's grab the geometry for the head. I'm going to scale it down as well. So here is the shell for the outside of the face. We'll position it there. Here's the shell for the inside of the face. I'll position it here, and I'm going to take these two, and I'm actually going to rotate them 90 degrees so that they fit nicely right in there. And now what we're going to do is we're going to export out the UVs for both the torso and the head simultaneously. So I'm going to make sure I have them both selected in object mode. In the Maya viewport, I'm going to click on polygons, and I'm going to come down to UV snapshot. All right, now the snapshot will end up being saved in your images folder because that's where all the output 2D files end up going. By default, it's called out UV. I'm going to be a little bit more specific and call this out UV underscore head underscore torso. I'm going to make this a 4K image texture just so I don't have any problems with resolution as it's being applied to my model. And I'm going to specify that the image format is a TIFF, and I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And then we'll get this little confirmation right down in the bar along the bottom that that has indeed taken place. All right, and so give me just a second, and we will hop over into Photoshop and start painting these UVs. All right, here I am in Photoshop. I've just opened up that document that I exported out, and you can see our UVs in white against black. Now, in my opinion, the easiest way to work with these is to double-click on the background layer to turn it into an actual editable layer. Hit Command or Control I to invert the values to be black on white. And then let's go ahead and click on the Blending Opacity Mode drop-down and select Multiply. And create a new layer and place that underneath this top layer right here. All right. And now what we can do is on this new layer is we can easily go in here and select around the geometry here. All right, and I'll do just a red fill on that. All right, so that when we apply this to a new blend material, everything that falls, all the UVs that fall within this little scope of red, actually, just so I'm not being downright sloppy, I'll fill those corners. But all the UVs that fall within this red right here will end up being exactly that color. They'll end up being red. All right. Now, create a new layer, and I'll put this new layer right in here. And actually, we'll just hit Command A, so I'll select all, and I'm going to grab a nice yellow. I want the yellow to skew a little warm, so I'm going to just shift it a little bit. Okay, I'll go ahead and do a fill right there, and so all the UVs that fall within the yellow will end up being yellow. Okay, so let's combine those two layers together. I did that with Command or Control E. I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer right here. I'm going to tap F so I have a little bit more flexibility with my artboard. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I'm going to hit D on my keyboard so that I get the just regular black and white swatches. I'm going to grab just the regular pen tool and come in here and paint in some UVs. All right, I'm just doing it kind of quick and doing it kind of crappy. Just for the purpose of being able to show you how this is done. Now, what's probably going to happen is I'm assuming that this texture is going to end up being a little large. If I hop back over here into Maya, and I come in and I take a look at my UVs, I'm just going to go into select face mode, and I'm going to select these UVs coming across right here and see that those correspond at this point on my geometry. And if I select these right here along the bottom, it corresponds with that point. So we know that our face needs to go in between those two sets of faces. All right. Oops. So I'm going to just go into free transform, make this a little smaller. All right, and put this in the center of that geometry, like so. All right, then we'll come right down here to the shirt, and we'll just go ahead and I'll grab the text tool, and we'll just do something boring like Lego. Yay! Not that the name Lego is boring, but yeah. I'll just stop before I say something stupid. Okay, I'll go ahead and just bring it in here and use the UVs to know where to visually position that. I'll press return, and now what I'm going to do is toggle off the visibility of the UV layer. All right, we don't want to reapply the UVs in this particular fashion to our geometry. So I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to hit Save As, so Command-Shift-S. And I want to save this now into my source images folder because this is where my input 2D files end up going. And I'm going to save this one as a Photoshop document, so I have some nice flexibility right there. And I'll just go ahead and just call this head_torso_texture. Hit save. Now we'll go back over to Maya. We'll close the UV texture editor. We want Hypershade to still be open, so I'm going to create a new blend material, and I'll double click on it. And just how we mapped the checkerboard pattern to this object, we want to map our new PSD file. So I'm going to click on that input node. Now, when the Create Render Node options pops open, because this is a Photoshop document, I want to specify a PSD file node as opposed to a general file node. So I'll go ahead and click on the folder right here. We'll go to the head_torso_texture and hit open. All right. Select these two in object mode. Right-click on that new blend material and hit Assign Material to Selection. Now, some of you guys might run into a situation where it looks kind of like this. The reason for that is I'm not 100% certain why, but unlike a JPEG or some other types of image files, when you attach a PSD file to a material, it tries to simultaneously attach that PSD file to the transparency channel. You can see we have these icons right here that show us that there's a node attached to the color channel and there's a node attached to the transparency channel. It's that attachment to the transparency channel that's creating this glitch right here. So if that does happen, simply right-click on the word transparency and come down and select break connection, and it'll take care of that for you. All right, so there we go. We've applied the textures to both the head and to the torso right there. I'm going to come back in the channel box editor, and I'm going to turn on the layer that contains the arms and the legs and stuff. I can create a new blend material. I'll double click on that, go to the color channel, and actually I'm going to set this from being the HSV, the hue saturation value, color picker, or color mode, to the RGB 0 to 255, so it matches what I'm doing in Photoshop. And I'll select the faces that constitute the arm right here, right click on that and assign those materials to that arm. Okay, let's select the faces for this arm, right click on that material and assign material to faces. I'll create another blend material, and this one is going to be yellow, but I'll come here into Photoshop, press I to grab the color picker, select that yellow, double click on the swatch so I can see exactly what the RGB values are. So it's 255, 234. So on this new blend material, we'll go to the color picker. If I just select the yellow right here, it's 255, 255. We need to change that green channel down to, whoops, need to change that to 234 so that it matches our particular temperature of yellow right here. Select the faces for that hand, assign the material to it, select the faces for this hand, assign that material to it, create another material, grab a nice little blue here. That is a ridiculously saturated blue. So we'll get something that's a little more neutral. Come in here and grab this geometry, right click, assign material to selection. All right. And there you go. Now, I would like to see you spend a little bit more time, with the craft or with the execution of the textures that you apply to the face. This was quick. This was dirty. This was, cheap. And I really want to see you guys push yourselves to capture that Lego aesthetic, as per whichever character that you're ultimately doing. And that applies to textures on the face, applies to textures on the front, on the back, etc.